I feel like there will be some bias in terms of the 7 hour rule specifically or fast escalation. When in a social circle game context, it may be the fact that it will be slower, that the amount of time will be longer because it's a social circle environment. With message game, on the other hand, if you're matching with women on Tinder, then well, we can get dates from that pretty easily. It's a different kind of context to day game or night game where you may be with her for a set number of time, but where message game is concerned, those message gamers who prioritize getting her over to your place straight away, that will bring the time frame down. Whereas there aren't particularly many guys who would use message game to go on a really, really long 10-hour date, for example. It does happen. Like, for example, I went on, like, here's an example where it took more than a few hours through Tinder. That is to get laid. That is because we met up to book this was a strange example, but our date idea was to go to another country for our date. So it took hours to travel, and that is why I'm the moderator. I shouldn't be biased or anything, but I'll leave it there. Do you think that there can be a kind of bias in terms of which game you play, in terms of where the 7 hour rule may be weaker or stronger, just like I mentioned with social circle
I
game
honestly
context?
don't think I don't think that I have a biased opinion on this because I've experimented with the full spectrum of game. I've done fast escalation game, I've done solid game, I've done synthetic game, natural game, I've done value-based game versus what I call ideal mate game. I've experienced the plethora of the different styles of game out there. So I don't think that I'm biased in my opinion. I've found that it is the most effective style of game most of the time.
Someone in the chat put it very nicely. The only game that matters is the one that brings you results. Similar to what I said at the end of the most recent panel, which hasn't been released yet. The best game is the one that works for you, which leads me into the idea I mentioned earlier. What are you guys thinking in terms of how these sides are affected by each type of game? Just like, for example, I mentioned about message game. Perhaps message game has it faster. Perhaps social circle game has it slower. How do you think each type of game, day game, night game, message game, social circle game, is affected by these concepts you are representing?
Yep, it's gonna you're gonna have calibration at different levels. So if you're on Tinder and you're messaging, yeah, you can build this up. You can have sexual authority. You can have girls come straight to your place for sex. If you're in somewhere like Eastern Europe, that may be a little bit more challenging there, but even so doable. But otherwise, you can just do like micro meets, is what we call it. So if you want, you can just meet a girl for like a fucking 10-minute coffee date, escalate it a little bit, and then get her to come over to your place later on. So yeah, I think in somewhere like text game, it can be relatively, well, very quickly by the time you meet up with her, you can come straight to your place. In day game, it's going to largely depend on logistics. So if she's running late for a bus, if she's got work, obviously you're not able to pull, but otherwise you can very quickly within 2 to 3 hours. If it's night game, then again, logistics play a little bit of a role here. The biggest one is going to be the friends. So sometimes the best solution for most guys is just waiting till the club closes if it's close to that time. So that could take up a little bit of time there. But otherwise, if you're able to deal with that friend objection, which I encourage guys to try to do, again, you can pull and close within 2 to 3 hours. Social circle, here it becomes a little bit different because you can play a slightly longer game here. But that being said, you're playing a longer game because you're usually at an event that you're hosting and you can't just like pull a girl to the bedroom and start closing her while you're trying to run an event. But the premise behind it is still the same. You can still build very quick sexualization. You can still get it to the point where she's ready for sex. You just don't want to logistically have that sex while you're running a party. You might want to wait to the end. But yeah, that's my views on the three different types.
Alrighty. Anyone else?
Okay, so when it comes to interpersonal communication, specifically for men to attract women, a lot of elements that create attraction in women cannot really be displayed so much on a Tinder or text message game in that sense. So I'm a strong advocate of day game, basically, where you actually go on by your day, see a woman that you find attractive, you approach, and then you're going to have a pretty normal conversation with her that do have those communication principles that makes things meaningful. So that is my main take, because when you're going to use interpersonal communication principles based on science, you have to talk with them face to face. It's very hard to go around it. So I've been working very extensively on the day game, where you're just going to go up to a woman and then start a conversation. Night game, on the other hand, could work for people that like to go out and meeting women out, outside at the evenings. I prefer bars and pubs rather than clubs, because they tend to be way too loud. And it's almost the same thing. You go up to women sitting there, a group of women sitting there talking, and you just go there and you start a genuine conversation with them. Mainly making them talk about what they think about things, why they're thinking a certain way in a certain place, and so on. So empathetic conversations is something that works very well, both on day game and night game. Not so well in texting, not so well on dating apps.
Alrighty. Erik, any thoughts on my question?
So am I understanding correctly that you want to know how our concepts of fast escalation versus solid game apply to message game?
To each form of game. So yeah, so for example, I mentioned in social circle game, which I'm not an expert on mystery method specifically, but by observation is that mystery method tends to have a lot of social circle elements, not as much as Michael Certain, where he's like completely social circle game combined with message game. But in the social circle sense, I imagine that because you're in a mix of lots of people, lots of women, it's not necessarily clear which one you will go home with that day or that night. So in social circle game, by default, whichever system you follow, it may be taking a longer time to take her home than it would with night game, for example.
Okay, so I'm still not 100% sure if I understand the question.
Perhaps it's more aimed at the fast escalation guys, so we can
So
just leave it at that. But
well, here's my general take on message game. Okay, some guys think that you should not be texting much, that texting should be purely for logistics and setting up dates. I believe that you can cover a bit of ground through text messaging if you do it properly. So yeah, if I'm going for more solid game, I'm going to message the woman in a more prolonged way. I'm going to send her voice messages. I'm going to send her songs that I'm into. I'm going to flirt with her from a distance, right? I maybe give her a video call or a phone call. If I'm going for something faster, if I think that it's on, I'm going to just invite her out. Then I'm going to take more the logistical route of let's meet up, let's get face to face.